AITA for refusing to give my sister my downtown loft because my mother says her Instagram content actually matters, while my forensic science career sucks the joy out of everything. I, 30M, have spent the last 8 years building a career as a forensic scientist. I've helped solve cases that brought closure to grieving families. I've testified in court proceedings that put dangerous people behind bars. I've spent countless nights in the lab analyzing evidence that meant the difference between justice and injustice for victims who couldn't speak for themselves anymore. But according to my mother, 54F, I suck the joy out of everything. I need to give you some background to understand why I'm sitting in my car outside my apartment building at 11 p.m., hands shaking, wondering if I'm the one who's been wrong this entire time. Growing up, my sister Megan, 28F, was the golden child. She was bubbly, outgoing, always performing for whatever audience would watch. Birthday parties, family gatherings, random Tuesday dinners. Megan made everything about herself, and my mother, Patricia, absolutely lived for it. Mom runs a successful party planning business called Celebrations by Patricia, and Megan was basically her walking advertisement. The perfect, photogenic daughter who celebrates life. Then there was me. Quiet. Analytical. The kid who asked, why, too many times and wanted to understand how things worked rather than just accept them. When Megan would blow out her birthday candles, I'd wonder about the thermodynamics of flame extinguishment. When we'd visit the beach, I'd collect shells to categorize rather than build sandcastles. When family came over, I'd read in my room instead of performing for relatives I barely knew. Marcus, why can't you just enjoy things like your sister? Became the soundtrack of my childhood. I learned to stop sharing my interests. When I got excited about a documentary on forensic entomology in high school, my mother literally said, "Why do you have to be so morbid? Megan is learning choreography for cheerleading tryouts and you're watching bugs eat dead things." I was 16. I stopped talking about what I loved after that. I put myself through college and graduate school with scholarships and part-time work. My mother paid for Megan's communications degree in full. I graduated with honors and got hired at the state crime lab. Megan graduated with a 2.3 GPA and became an Instagram influencer. Guess which one of us my mother brags about at family functions? If you guessed, the forensic scientist who helps solve murders, you'd be wrong. Apparently, Megan's 89,000 followers on Instagram are more impressive than identifying the perpetrator in a cold case that had gone unsolved for 15 years. That case. The victim was a 19-year-old college student. Her parents called me personally to thank me when we finally got a conviction. I cried in my car for an hour afterward. I told my mother about it. She said, "That's nice, honey. Did you see Megan's brand deal with that teeth whitening company? She's really making something of herself." 3 years ago, I bought a downtown loft with money I'd saved for nearly a decade. It's not huge, but it's mine. Exposed brick, tall windows that let in beautiful natural light, a view of the city skyline. It's the first real thing I've ever owned, and I poured everything into making it a home. I have a small reading nook by the window. A wall of bookshelves. A kitchen where I've learned to cook meals that nourish me after long days of witnessing the worst humanity has to offer. This loft is my sanctuary. The one place where I don't feel like a disappointment. Last week, my mother called me. This alone was unusual. She typically only reaches out when she needs something or wants to relay news about Megan's latest accomplishment. But this call was different. Her voice had that particular honeyed quality she uses when she's about to ask for something unreasonable. "Marcus, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important." "It's about Megan." Of course it was. She explained that Megan's content engagement was down. Her followers weren't growing like they used to. She was losing brand deals. The solution? Megan desperately needed a new, more photogenic space for her content creation. And my loft, with its exposed brick and natural lighting, would be perfect. She just needs to borrow it for a few weeks, my mother said. Maybe a month or 2. You can stay with me while she uses it. Her content creation actually matters, Marcus. She's building a brand. A future. You just go to work and come home like everyone else. I was silent for a long moment. My work involves helping solve crimes, giving families closure, putting dangerous people away. Yes, and that's very serious and admirable, but Megan is building something creative. Something that brings joy to people. You've always been the one who sucks the joy out of everything, honey. Let your sister have this. She celebrates life while you just exist in it. I told her no. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. My mother has never handled being told no well, but this felt different. Colder somehow. "We'll talk about this more later," she said finally. "I think you're being selfish, but I'm sure you'll come around when you think about what family means." She hung up before I could respond. Since then, both my mother and Megan have been bombarding me with messages. Megan alternates between guilt-tripping, "I thought we were family," and subtle threats, "It would be really sad if everyone knew what kind of brother you are." My mother has started telling extended family that I'm going through something and being difficult. 2 aunts have already called to lecture me about supporting family. But here's what really gets me: I solve crimes for a living. I spend my days surrounded by evidence of what happens when people hurt other people. I see victims. I see perpetrators. I see the aftermath of violence and greed and betrayal. And somehow, my own mother treats me like I'm the one who's committed a crime simply by existing as something other than what she wanted. I'm sitting in my car right now because I just got a text from Megan that said, "Mom and I are coming over tomorrow to discuss this further. You should really reconsider your position, Marcus. This doesn't have to be hard." Something about that message felt like a threat. Am I being paranoid? Am I really the bad guy here for not wanting to give up my home so my sister can take pictures in better lighting? Am I the one sucking the joy out of everything by simply wanting to exist in peace? I don't know anymore. I've spent 30 years being told I'm wrong for being who I am. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am just a joyless person who doesn't understand what really matters. But also, something feels very wrong about all of this. Edit. Thank you for all the comments. I didn't expect this kind of response. Many of you are suggesting I document everything and be cautious about tomorrow's visit. A few of you mentioned that, as a forensic scientist, I should trust my instincts about evidence and threat assessment. You're right. I've decided to take some precautions before they arrive. I'll update when I know more. Update 1, 4 days later. I need to tell you all what happened. I'm still processing it, but you deserve to know that your instincts, and mine, were correct. First, some context about my decision-making process. Several commenters on my original post reminded me that my entire professional life revolves around evidence collection and analysis. One comment in particular stuck with me: "You literally solve crimes for a living. Trust your training." So I did. Before my mother and sister's visit, I installed several security cameras in my loft. I want to be very clear: this is completely legal in my state. I own the property, the cameras are in my home, and single-party consent laws apply. I made sure to verify this with a colleague who specializes in legal admissibility of evidence before proceeding. The cameras are small, unobtrusive, and positioned to capture the living room and kitchen areas, the spaces where I anticipated any discussion would take place. I also moved all important documents, my deed, financial records, personal files, to a secure location outside my apartment. Call it paranoia. Call it professional instinct. Either way, I'm grateful I did. The visit happened 3 days ago. My mother and Megan arrived together, which I expected. What I didn't expect was the additional guest, a man I'd never seen before, introduced only as Richard, a family friend who helps with legal matters. My mother said he was there to help mediate our discussion. Red flag number 1. They came in and immediately began pointing out features of my loft: the windows, the brick wall, the kitchen island. Megan was taking pictures. "Just for reference," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "To see what we're working with." Red flag number 2. My mother sat me down and launched into a speech about family obligations. About how she'd given up so much to raise us, though I distinctly remember raising myself while she focused on Megan. About how Megan's career was at a critical juncture and needed support. About how my stubbornness was hurting the family. Then Richard spoke up. "Marcus, I understand you have concerns about the property. But your mother and Megan have been discussing some options that might work for everyone. There are ways to structure temporary transfers of property that could benefit the whole family financially." "Temporary transfers of property," I repeated. "Just on paper," my mother said quickly. "Megan would use the space, build her brand, and eventually when she's successful enough to afford her own place, everything goes back to normal. Richard can draw up documents that make it all official and protected." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. In my line of work, I've seen countless cases that started with, "just on paper." "What kind of documents?" I asked. Richard pulled out a folder. "Just some standard forms. Power of attorney, temporary property transfer authorization, that sort of thing. Your mother mentioned you might be too busy with work to handle the details, so these would allow her to manage the transition on your behalf." I looked at the papers. They were dense with legal language, but certain phrases jumped out at me: irrevocable transfer, full authority, permanent assignment of deed. These weren't temporary arrangements. This was an attempt to steal my home. I'll need to have my own attorney review these, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. I'm sure you understand. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Marcus, don't be difficult, my mother said. Her honeyed tone was gone. We're trying to help you here. You've always been so suspicious of everything. This is why you can't maintain relationships. You overthink everything and trust no one. The documents stay with me for review, I said. Actually, Richard interjected, these are proprietary forms. I can't leave them with you without. Then we're done here. What happened next is captured in crystal clear detail on my security cameras. My mother's mask dropped completely. She turned to Richard and Megan and said, I told you he'd be impossible. We'll have to go with the other plan. The backup forms? Megan asked. The ones we prepared in case he didn't cooperate. Richard, you said you could replicate his signature from the Christmas cards I saved, right? Richard nodded. It's not ideal, but with the property records Patricia pulled from the county database and the signature samples, we can file the transfer without his involvement. By the time he notices, it'll be tied up in legal proceedings for months, and Megan can use the space in the meantime. They were discussing forging documents, committing fraud, stealing my home, right in front of me. Except they didn't know I was recording. I said nothing. I let them leave. My mother hugged me at the door and said, Think about what I said, honey. Family is everything. Then they were gone, and I had everything I needed. I've spent the last 3 days consulting with an attorney, who has reviewed both the footage and the documents they tried to get me to sign. She's advised me to file police reports for attempted fraud and conspiracy to commit property theft. The evidence is incontrovertible. I also discovered something else during this process. Richard isn't a lawyer. He's not licensed to practice law in any state. He's a former paralegal who was disbarred. Wait, no, he was never barred to begin with because he never passed the bar, who now runs a document preparation service that has been the subject of 3 previous fraud complaints. My mother and sister tried to steal my home using a professional con artist, and they planned the whole thing in my living room while I watched. I haven't confronted them yet. My attorney has advised me to wait until the legal process is further along. But I wanted to update everyone here because you were right. You were all right. This isn't about a loft. This isn't about Instagram content. This is about 2 people who never saw me as a real person with rights and feelings, who saw me only as an obstacle to what they wanted. I'll update again when there are developments. Update 2, 3 weeks later. The situation has escalated significantly. I'll try to keep this organized because a lot has happened. First, the criminal charges. The district attorney's office reviewed my evidence and has filed charges against my mother, Megan, and Richard for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted forgery, and attempted property theft. Richard is facing additional charges for unauthorized practice of law based on his consultation with my mother and the documents he prepared. My attorney tells me these are serious felonies that carry significant penalties. When my mother was served with the charges, she called me 17 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that ranged from tearful, "How could you do this to your own mother?" to threatening, "You have no idea what you've started, Marcus," to eerily calm, "This isn't over. I know things about you that could ruin your career." I saved all of them. Megan's response was different. She went public on Instagram. She posted a tearful video claiming I was persecuting her for asking to borrow my apartment. She left out the part about the forged documents, the conspiracy, the fake lawyer. She painted herself as a victim of a jealous, cruel brother who couldn't stand to see her succeed. For about 48 hours, she received an outpouring of support. Her followers rallied around her. She gained nearly 8,000 new followers. Comments flooded in calling me a monster, suggesting I was abusive, demanding I be fired from my job. Then the full story came out. A journalist from a local news outlet had been following the case. Apparently, Richard's previous fraud victims had reached out when they saw the charges filed, and the reporter was already working on an investigation into his document preparation service. When she learned about my case, she dug deeper. She obtained copies of the court filings, which included transcripts of the recorded conversations. The story ran with the headline, "Instagram influencer and mother caught on camera planning property fraud against family member." The video went viral. Within 72 hours, Megan lost every single brand partnership she had. Companies released statements distancing themselves from her, citing conduct inconsistent with our values. Her follower count, which had temporarily spiked, began plummeting. She's now down to fewer than 45,000 followers and dropping daily. But the impact on my mother has been even more severe. Celebrations by Patricia has been her identity for over 20 years. She's planned weddings, corporate events, milestone birthdays for some of the most prominent families in our area. Her business runs on reputation and trust. People invite her into the most important moments of their lives. When the story broke, her clients began canceling. First a few, then dozens. A country club that had contracted her for their entire annual event calendar terminated the relationship. A bride whose wedding she was planning 2 weeks out found a new planner at the last minute and posted about it on social media, explaining that she couldn't trust someone who would try to steal from her own son. Last week, I learned that my mother has closed Celebrations by Patricia. The business she built over 2 decades, gone in less than a month. Part of me feels nothing. Part of me feels devastated. I'm still trying to sort through which feeling is real. In the midst of all this, something unexpected happened at work. My supervisor called me into his office. I assumed it was about the case. The publicity had been significant, and I worried about how it might reflect on the lab. Instead, he told me that I'd been selected for promotion to lead forensic investigator, a position I'd been working toward for years. "Your work speaks for itself, Marcus," he said. "The Richardson case analysis you completed last month was exceptional. And I want you to know that your personal situation hasn't affected our confidence in you. If anything, it's shown us the kind of character you have. You handled an impossible situation with integrity and professionalism." I promoted to lead forensic investigator. The job I've been dreaming about since graduate school. That night, I went home to my loft that is still mine, that will always be mine, and I sat in my reading nook and cried for an hour. Not from sadness. From something else. Relief, maybe. Or grief for the family I never really had. I haven't spoken to my mother or Megan since the charges were filed. I don't know when I will. But I'm starting to understand something. For 30 years, I believed them when they said I sucked the joy out of everything. I believed I was the problem. I believed that my way of being, quiet, analytical, careful, was somehow wrong. Lesser. I was wrong about being wrong. I'll update again when there's resolution. Update 3, 6 weeks later. This is my final update. The legal proceedings have mostly concluded, and something happened this week that I need to share with all of you. First, the legal outcomes. Richard pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized practice of law. Between my case and the 3 others that came forward after the news coverage, he's facing 2 to 5 years in state prison. His sentencing is next month. My mother accepted a plea deal, guilty plea to conspiracy to commit fraud in exchange for a reduced charge. She received 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. The judge was particularly harsh in his comments, noting that attempting to steal from her own child represented a profound violation of trust. Megan's charges were reduced as part of the plea arrangement. She received probation and counseling as well, plus restitution payments to cover my legal fees. None of them will serve prison time. I have mixed feelings about that, but my attorney assures me that the permanent criminal records will follow them for the rest of their lives. And frankly, I'm not sure prison would have helped anyone. What they did came from something broken inside them, and bars can't fix that. The consequences beyond the legal system have been severe. My mother has lost her business, her professional reputation, and most of her social circle. Several longtime friends stopped speaking to her when the story came out. Her sister, my aunt who had called to lecture me about supporting family, reached out to apologize to me personally. She said she had no idea what my mother was really like. Megan's influencer career is effectively over. Her remaining followers are mostly people who followed for the drama and will leave once the next scandal catches their attention. No brand will touch her. She's applied for traditional jobs but keeps getting rejected when potential employers Google her name. By all objective measures, justice has been served. But here's the part one didn't expect. 2 days ago, I received a letter from my mother. A physical letter, handwritten, which is something she hasn't done in years. I almost threw it away unopened. Instead, I waited until I'd finished work, made myself dinner, and sat down in my reading nook, my sanctuary, to read it. I won't share the whole thing, but I want to tell you the part that mattered. She wrote about therapy. About how the court-ordered counseling had forced her to examine patterns she'd never questioned. About how the therapist had helped her understand that she'd spent her whole life equating worth with performance, with visibility, with being seen and admired. Megan had always given her that reflection. I never had. "I don't think I ever saw you as a real person," she wrote. "I saw you as a problem to be solved, an inconvenience that didn't fit the life I was trying to create. When you didn't perform the way I needed, I decided you were defective rather than different. I can see now how profoundly that failed you. I failed you, Marcus. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to know that I finally understand what I did." She ended by saying she was proud of my promotion, that she'd read about my work on several cases, that she finally understood that what I do, bringing justice to victims, closure to families, matters more than any Instagram post ever could. I sat with that letter for a long time. Yesterday, Megan reached out. Not through lawyers this time. A simple text message. I know I don't deserve a response. I've been in therapy for 5 weeks now, and I'm starting to see how broken my thinking was. I never saw you as a person. You were just this obstacle. This reminder that not everything was about me. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I finally see you. I haven't responded to either of them yet. I don't know if I will. What I know is this. For 30 years, I was told I was the problem. I was told I sucked the joy out of everything. I was told that my quiet, analytical, careful way of being was lesser than my sister's brightness. I internalized that message so deeply that I genuinely believed there was something wrong with me. But here's what I've learned. The joy I bring to the world looks different than the joy my sister brings. When I analyze evidence correctly and a murderer is convicted, that brings closure to a grieving family. That's joy. When I testify in court and help ensure justice is served, that's joy. When I mentor junior scientists and watch them develop their skills, that's joy. I don't suck the joy out of everything. I create joy in ways my mother was never equipped to see. And that's not my failing, it's hers. To everyone who commented on my original post, who told me to trust my instincts, who validated my sense that something was wrong, thank you. You helped me see clearly at a time when I was drowning in doubt. I'm not sure what my relationship with my mother and sister will look like going forward. Maybe nothing. Maybe something small and cautious. The damage they did can't be undone, and trust, once this thoroughly broken, may never be fully restored. But I've found something more important than their approval. I've found my own. My loft is still mine. My career is flourishing. My life is quiet and meaningful and good. I've started dating someone, a public defender I met during a case consultation, who finds my forensic science explanations fascinating rather than morbid. We had dinner last week, and she asked me to explain how blood spatter analysis works. For the first time in my life, I talked about my work with someone who leaned in rather than pulled away. Some people celebrate life with parties and pictures. I celebrate it by seeking truth in the evidence, by speaking for those who can no longer speak for themselves. That's not sucking the joy out of everything. That's creating a different kind of joy, the kind that matters when no one's watching. Final edit. Thank you all for following this journey. For those asking, yes, I did eventually respond to my mother and sister. I told them both that I appreciated their acknowledgement, that I hoped their therapy continued to help them grow, but that I wasn't ready for a relationship with either of them. Maybe someday. Maybe not. That's my choice to make now. The reading nook in my loft, the one by the tall windows with the city view, has become my favorite place in the world. I sit there most evenings now, sometimes reading, sometimes just existing in the space I fought to keep. It turns out that existing peacefully in your own life isn't sucking the joy out of everything. It's just joy that looks different. And different was never wrong. It was just mine. Posted from my downtown loft, which is still mine.